Why the fuck you lying? Why you always lying?
If that was the case, then why didn't they just include more of his DNA and the weapon at the crime scene? Which is a good point, right?
Great
it's a
question.
very good point.
Yeah, or any of the victim's DNA in his car, his house, anywhere.
Right. They could have done all of that, right? If he was going to be a witting patsy even. Well, it wouldn't make Othram Labs look like the superstars that they are if there was an abundance of DNA found in the house and a murder weapon, right? So you make it like, oh, it's just a speck. And miraculously, they're able to come up with the build the sample and nail the guy who did it. So if there was an abundance of DNA at the scene, Othram wouldn't look like rock stars.
And nobody would even know who they were. They would just keep flying under the radar.
Why you always lying?
Okay, you guys are completely misunderstanding why it went to Othram. It did not go to Othram because of a small sample size. It went to Othram because that's the last resort when somebody doesn't come up in CODIS. Okay, so inmate 163214's DNA was not in CODIS, so they weren't getting a hit. So they decided to do the genetic genealogy route so that they could catch him faster. And sample size has nothing to do with Othram. As a matter of fact, the sample size was very large. He had left over 8.5 nanograms of his DNA on that sheath. And it wasn't planted. I know you're trying to claim it was planted, but Othram even said it was a larger sample size than they normally get. So sample size has nothing to do with why it went to Othram. And they haven't been flying under the radar. I don't even know why Kristen made that comment. Othram has been used in many cold cases, and now they're being used in contemporary cases. They helped solve Rachel Marin's murder. They found her murderer through the IgG process. So it's absolutely ridiculous to think that this was some sort of vehicle for promoting Othram. No, they went to Othram strictly because he wasn't in CODIS, and they wanted to catch him before he could kill again.
We all probably by now have seen the video, the body cam video, where the guy whispers one of the victims was what sounds like pretty clearly a CI.
Yeah.
There was a CI. There was federal funding in the area. So that program was not just local law enforcement. It was in conjunction with the university. If it got out to the public that law enforcement, federal, local, and the university had a system in place where they were utilizing students as confidential informants, and it got 4 students killed as a result,
I've thought about that.
You can say goodbye to the funding for that school. Public funding gone.
The FBI had been there for 6+ months preceding the event, right? With respect to the rug issue going through northern Idaho.
Why you always lying?
Okay, here is that video of Lanier on the body cam. You can take a listen. Now, I personally do not hear him saying CI. It sounds to me like he's saying Sigma Chi, which would be Ethan. And the way his mouth moves also does not look like he's saying CI, but that's for you to decide. I personally don't think that, and none of them in that house were confidential informants.
I don't know the names of the victims, sir.
Now, as far as your claim that they had a federal task force there in Moscow at the time and that it was involved with the university, no. There is the North Idaho Violent Crime Task Force, which is involved with the FBI, and that has officers from Lewiston, Nez Perce County, and Grangeville Police Department, Nez Perce Tribe Police Department, Idaho State Police, and Post Falls Police Department. Notice who's not involved in that: Moscow Police, Latah County Sheriff, etc. Also, universities are not receiving federal funding from the Department of Justice for drug task force. Okay, they're not involved with those. Do they get federal funding for many other things? Yes, including campus safety, but they're not getting federal funding for these task force programs to catch drug cartels. That's absolutely ridiculous. Now, there is a local non-FBI task force that does drug busts and tries to crack down on the drug issue. That's the Quad City Task Force, which is comprised of law enforcement from Whitman, Latah, Nez Perce, and Asotin counties. So that does include people from the Moscow PD and the Latah County Sheriff's Office. But that has nothing to do with the University of Idaho, and it's not in conjunction with the FBI. And yes, there are some counties in Idaho that are part of the high-intensity drug trafficking area, but if you notice, Latah County is not one of them. Kootenai is, and that's where that FBI task force is located. up at is the Kootenai area. There was no operations going on in Latah County. There was not 60 FBI agents there like people keep trying to claim. The FBI did not show up until after Chief Fry called them. Okay, there was no sting operations going on around the 1122 house. All of that is baseless rumors. And I don't understand why people that are lawyers would think it's okay to even entertain these rumors when talking about a real murder case.
And I don't really know her background that extensively, but what I do know is my understanding that she was part of a trafficking organized group, some sort of task force. And then my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, JJ, that she retired and then they brought her back specifically to interview Dylan and only Dylan. It just seems weird, doesn't it? We're bringing this female who was in retirement. We're bringing her out of retirement.
Why you always lying?
Okay, that is false. She was not in retirement. She did not retire until 2023, and then she came back out of retirement then. She interviewed Dylan in 2022. She was not in retirement, and they had her interview Dylan because Gooch is very good at working with eyewitnesses and victims to try to get more out of them. Because as you know, eyewitnesses remember things in bits and pieces, and Detective Gooch is very good at working with the eyewitnesses, and especially women. So that's why she was brought in. And it has nothing to do with trafficking like you went on to try to claim, okay? It was strictly because they felt like she would be able to get Dylan to recall more things.
Is it possible that that whole house was put together as a hub to have students that would be maybe even unwittingly, maybe some of them didn't even know that they were going to be part of that? Your point about the house seeming like very inorganic in the way that that house came together, in my opinion, and I'm just thinking about this on the spot, it would be plausible that if there were operations going on and that house on any level, whether it was one person, two people, or whatever, were CIs, why not more than one? Why not that whole location being used, right? They typically, we've all heard the term, we all watch the movies, a safe house, right? Maybe that was the house that was used for people that were working in a particular program that had funding.
Why you always lying?
Yeah, that's a no. That house was a Pi Beta Phi live-out house. And before that, members of the university track team had lived there. It's always been a house that gets rented out by different groups, so athletes, sororities, etc. And it did not come together in an inorganic way. Maddie was already living in there the year prior with other Pi Phis, and then when that group graduated, and then Ashlyn also decided not to come back and live there that fall, then Maddie asked Bethany, Dylan, and Xana to live there with her because she all knew them from Pi Beta Phi, and then Kaylee, of course, because that had been her best friend for years. So all these claims that they didn't really know each other, that had they not moved in together, they wouldn't know each other, are absolutely false.
How did you end up in the house with the girls?
My best friend in sorority, you have bigs and littles. Madison Mogan is, and she reached out to some of us to live with her, and I knew her pretty well, and that's how I got to live there.
So is your friend?
Yeah, she was in with me as well. We moved in together into that house.
And how did the other girls come to live with you?
Xana is a year older than me, and she also knew Maddie, and Maddie reached out to her. Kaylee Goncalves is her lifelong best friend. They're like sisters. Maddie also reached out to her to live with her because they always needed to fill up rooms.
And did you know them before this semester?
Yes.
Through the sorority?
I knew Maddie and Xana through the sorority beforehand, and I'd gone over to the house with Maddie and her roommates, and she had Kaylee over a lot, and I saw her and met her a few times.
And so how well did you know the three other girls besides before you moved in?
Pretty well. Me and Maddie and Xana hung out a lot. My was best friends with Xana, so I was at their house a lot, and I knew Xana pretty well.
That huge deal that was on the table too, I think it was like with a secondary college, like University of Phoenix or something, wasn't it? They had that massive multi-million-dollar deal that was on the table. So if you think about what University of Idaho had to lose, also look at the fact that if they didn't get their public funding, that university ran that was the income for the whole entire town.
Yeah.
Why you always lying?
Okay, it's absolutely laughable that you would think the University of Phoenix proposal had anything to do with the murders, okay, and that they would cover up, that 5 different agencies would do a cover up because University of Idaho was interested in buying University of Phoenix. I mean, first of all, it was Phoenix that was looking for a buyer. They've been looking for one for a long time because they were having financial troubles. This wasn't University of Idaho looking for a buyer. It was University of Phoenix. And so University of Phoenix was not going to care that there were 4 murders off campus. They just wanted somebody to buy them and get them out of their financial woes. Now, the deal did get terminated due to other reasons, nothing to do with the murders, and University of Idaho did get money from that termination. So again, they didn't really care about anything with that Phoenix deal as far as the murders went. So just laughable that you would even think that. 5 agencies are not going to do a cover up because University of Phoenix wants somebody to buy them. Now, as far as your claim that the university was going to lose funding, universities don't lose federal funding when murders take place off campus in their town, okay? And yes, they were 4 students, but they still don't lose funding because some depraved young man went into an off-campus home and killed 4 students.
To go along with the official narrative, then some of the alternative narratives, like literally based on facts from professionals, from expert forensic, investigators. Some weird, awkward guy who's like a super dedicated student stabs or uses whatever types of close range weapons to murder 4 people that he has no connection to. He has no connections to other crimes and no verified connections to any of the victims. It's just, that's, to me, every forensic investigator would say, yes, that is absolutely true. But yet the media acts like you're crazy. How you guys are crazy conspiracy theorists.
Don't most mass killers work up to killing humans?
Yeah. I have that note sitting right in front of me right now.
And you just don't go straight to 4.
And it's not just that he committed, if it's his first time that he was able to kill with a knife 4 people in a house in a short period of time, but he managed it almost perfectly, leaving 1 source of DNA, no footprints, nothing in his car, nothing in any of his work or home. I mean, that's almost perfect execution for your first time.
Why you always lying?
Oh, so first-time killers don't go straight to killing 4 people? Well, yeah, they actually do, and some of them actually murder more than that. Richard Speck, first and only time he murdered, he killed 8 nursing students in a townhome. First time. Went to 8. Not 4, 8. Dennis Rader, the BTK killer. First time he ever murdered, he murdered 4 members of the Otero family. So he went straight to 4. Luke Truesdell, first time he ever murdered, straight to 4. Murdered 4 victims. And as far as a first-time murderer not leaving behind any evidence, Daniel Marsh was only 15 years old. Okay? 15 years old. And he brutally murdered the Maupins, Claudia and Chip, and he left no forensic evidence behind. Law enforcement was befuddled because there was nothing. The only reason why they caught him was because he bragged to a friend. So don't act like this doesn't happen, because it does. And don't act like inmate 163214 wasn't capable of this, because he was.
To bring something up and get both of your opinions on, you remember early on there was sort of talk, nothing official, about gunshots, right, in the area. Now, before, this is early on, way before things got really squirrely with this case, I thought, Idaho is a very pro-gun state. It's very, it's basically permitless carry in Idaho. Yeah. Is it possible that guns were used in the case and they didn't want the political heat when the case, they knew it would be a major national story for young, attractive college students brutally murdered, that they covered that aspect up? Now, I'm not suggesting that there were no bladed weapons used. Well, I went to Idaho. You don't even have to have a permit to carry in Idaho. And citizens there probably like that. Now, what happens if 4 college students are involved in a gun crime? That is going to blow up, and all the political people are going to jump all over it within a day. and they're going to be talking about gun control. Or we need to get this under control. This Idaho, we got these crazy gun laws. So I think that is a possibility too. And did you guys notice in the 1112 camera footage, there's a flash of light you see in the window?
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up. We actually talked about it pretty extensively. Yeah, I think whether it was a firearm or even the bean bags, well, I think with Kaylee's injuries and her face being not even recognizable is my understanding, I think that it's very likely and that something of a weapon was involved, and the investigators, the law enforcement, they checked that box from the very, very beginning with respect to potential weapons that they were looking for. The firearm box was checked.
There was a very early report that one of the family members,
Christy,
cousin, said that Kaylee had been shot.
Why you always lying?
Okay, so you're really going to tell me that with these findings in the autopsies, that they were really shot in addition to being stabbed? No. Okay, the medical examiner found no gunshot wounds. None. The injuries to Kaylee's face, she had several stab wounds to her face. Okay, it wasn't gunshots. And they also believe she was punched in the face several times. And it's laughable to think that they would cover this up so that it wouldn't lead to gun control legislation. Okay, you're talking about Idaho. Okay, there's been shooting deaths in Idaho. Idaho is not one of the loony blue states. Okay, they don't have to worry about somebody pushing gun control legislation in Idaho. Also, the medical examiner, Veena Singh, is in Spokane. Okay, Washington, very blue state. We have a lot of gun control here in Washington. So Veena Singh would not be somebody that would cover up anything on the autopsies to try to stop gun control legislation. Give me a break. This stuff is so ludicrous that you guys come up with, not based in reality. Also, early on when Christy's niece said she heard they were shot, that's because rumors were going around. When you hear that 4 people are dead in the same house, a lot of people assume that it's a shooting. There was also rumors going around that it was a fentanyl overdose. None of those things were true. So because Christy's niece said that early on doesn't mean that they were shot. You also have to remember there was another shooting that day over at University of Virginia where a young man shot some of the members of their football team. And a lot of media was getting that mixed up in the headlines as well. So I still find it hard to believe that 2 of you are lawyers with the lack of critical thinking skills that you have. And as far as this search warrant, I would think you as lawyers would understand that you don't want to make the scope of it so narrow that you can't take in anything that you may find. So, of course, they check the box for any kind of weapons, even if that weapon wasn't used in the crime. And as far as the flash of light that was seen in the 1112 video, that was at the house at the end of the street. And that was clearly a camera flash from like somebody's cell phone or a camera. That was not a gunshot, okay? And even if it were a gunshot, which it wasn't even at 1122 King. So just stop with this nonsense.
7-8 minute or whatever it was, 9-minute time frame approximately at all, because I don't buy that the event happened when they said it did.
Right.
I think they needed to steer the narrative away from another timeline. I think it's very possible.
Look over here.
Yeah, I'd like to get your opinion. Why? Let's hypothesize. Why? Let's just assume they did change the timeline narrative.
Mm-hmm.
In your opinions, what do you think the reason for that would be?
Because it makes it impossible for Kohberger to take the fall. Because we know he wasn't. We know he was in Pullman before 3. In that time frame where this other stuff, the screams and everything happened. We know he wasn't at the house at that time.
And I think they also get all of the video and audio footage, and then they already have their conclusion, and now they're trying to get the evidence to completely match and support the conclusion. And they get some of these rings and screams and stuff, and it's like, oh, whoa, that's not going to hold up. So we need to reformulate exactly what our timeline is. And I think they keep changing the timeline to some extent. I think it's 8 minutes, 13 minutes. And yesterday when we were going through more of the forensic reports, one of the prosecution's witness in their rebuttal or their amended or supplemental expert report, one of them even said that it was possible to 2 to 4 minutes. I don't know if it was Sutton or Ayers, but I was like, okay, now this is even more crazy.
Why you always lying?
Okay, first of all, they haven't really changed the timeline. Not very much at all. They had established that it was after 4 pretty much right from the get-go. And that was based on the video footage of the vehicle. That was based on Dylan's eyewitness testimony, Bethany, what she heard, and also based on proof of life. Like, here's one example. Maddie called Bethany at 2:53 a.m. Maddie was obviously still alive at 2:53 a.m. You have the calls and texts from both Maddie and Kaylee to Jack Ducour. Then you have Xana and her food delivery. And ISP confirmed that she brought the food inside and had been eating it. So she was alive and well after 4 a.m. and she was on TikTok and she posted a comment after 4 a.m. that had an inside joke. So it wasn't somebody else using her phone. It was Xana. They confirmed she was on TikTok up to 4:12 a.m. Proof of life shows that the crimes did not happen prior to 4 a.m. Now, the report you're thinking of came from Darren Gilbertson. Here's that report. Idaho State Police did timed runs based on the forensic information and the autopsies and determined that it could be done in as little as 2 to 3 minutes. They're not saying that inmate 163214 did it in 2 to 3 minutes. They didn't change the timeline to say 2 to 3 minutes. They're saying it could be done in as little as 2 to 3 minutes, which obviously makes it very possible for him to do it in the amount of time, which was parking the vehicle at 4:07 a.m. and driving off at 4:21 a.m. Makes it very possible, and it has been done before. Remind you the Brentwood 5 stabbing up in Canada. 5 people stabbed to death. He did that all within less than 15 minutes. So this isn't something new. This isn't something unbelievable. And no, they did not change the timeline, and they didn't change anything to fit inmate 163214. The evidence led to him. The DNA at the scene, the car circling, the eyewitness account, him turning his phone off at 100% charge, yada, yada, yada. It all led to him. They didn't fit it to him. It led to him.
I think that we could all agree that with all of the very inconsistent information or evidence that keeps coming out, it is hard to follow. I do think there's more evidence that points to alternative suspects than there is that ties it to Brian Koberger. I mean, without that sheath, there's nothing. There is nothing to tie him.
Why you always lying?
This is really interesting coming from a lawyer, because I would assume you would know that early in investigation, everything is always fluid. New information is coming in fast, and they follow leads, and they look at potential evidence, and they rule people out. And what you're seeing released in the doc dumps, especially the MPD and the ISP doc dumps, were the early initial stages of the investigation, when they were collecting evidence, when they were doing door canvassing, when they were following up on leads. And as they ruled people out, then they narrowed in on who the perpetrator was. So it may seem confusing with the order things are being released, but you have to look at the big picture. You can't just look at documents from the initial days of the investigation and say, oh, well, there's evidence that leads to alternate perpetrators, because there really wasn't. And I would love to know what evidence you think was more plentiful towards alternate perpetrators than the evidence towards inmate 163214, because no evidence at the scene matches up with anybody else. But please do a video with what evidence you think shows that it was Showalter or Ducour or any of the other people you guys constantly try to accuse falsely.
That was very, very little information that they provided to the public with respect to that subpoena. So they were clearly only giving us a very small portion. And then there's allegedly a gift card. And then the order came 2.5 hours later or something like that. And then potentially her son was the one that delivered Domino's pizza to the King Road residence earlier that night. And it's just like, it's like whiplash. I'm like, okay, so I'm here. But I think that is intentional so that we all stay in this place of like, WTF.
Why you always lying?
Okay, so DoorDash up in Pullman on an early Sunday morning, the time Xana ordered it. I've checked this several times. The express delivery is 54 to 73 minutes. Standard 59 to 78. So well over an hour. I've ordered DoorDash up there myself before too on game weekends, and it can take forever. And if you listen to Molly's interview, they also had to remake food because she was late, etc. So you already have a standard delivery time of almost 80 minutes. So that's almost an hour and a half. And then you add in Molly's dilly-dallying, and that's why it came an hour and a half later. Now, as far as the dominoes, I did a whole video on those Venmo transactions because people were trying to claim that Xana and Ethan's Venmo was for pizza on Saturday night. It was not. The transaction was on Friday night. They had pizza on Friday night when they had the party at the house. They did not have Domino's on Saturday night. And even if Molly's son was driving for Domino's, big deal. That it doesn't even mean he would have been their delivery driver when they had the pizza on Friday night. So I don't even know why that is even something that you would bring up, because it's irrelevant to the case who delivered their pizza on Friday night.
Anybody's theory can be picked apart, especially if someone's being intellectually dishonest, right? You see a lot of that on the chats and message boards and things.
Oh, yeah.
But I think also a lot of people are afraid to admit they were duped. It's
Agreed.
something I've talked about a lot. Birdie and I talked about it when I was on with him. It's very hard. It's like cognitive dissonance. It really gets to people. They tend to, rather than question what they believe, they double down on it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just it's a pretty standard element of human behavior.
Okay, so I'm not going to give the "why are you always lying" prompt on that one, because he's actually correct. Cognitive dissonance is a huge issue in this case, and people being intellectually dishonest, but he's wrong about who is doing it. It's not the people that believe that inmate 163214 is guilty. It's the people like Birdie. It's the people like custody queens, like this guy they had on there with them. They're the ones being intellectually dishonest. I can name off all of the content creators that ignore the evidence about inmate 163214. It's like covering their ears and going, la, 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 I don't want to listen. They're set in their ways. They're doubling, tripling, quadrupling down, and they're ignoring all of the evidence against him. So, I say it all the time, do better.